Hey guys, this is Anne Marie, and just a quick thought. Sometimes the common denominator is you. Sometimes the common denominator is us. Sometimes the common denominator is me. This is something that I had to realize when I was an employee, that before I pointed the finger and said my employer was treating me badly or unfairly or in a discriminatory manner, I needed to engage in self-evaluation and self-assessment to determine whether I was in fact the primary problem. And more, I interact with people on discovery calls especially, where it's very clear to me that the issue is not the employer, the issue is them, right? And so I want to make a quick video to talk about how important it is to be self-aware and to engage in critical thinking and to be honest about not just what is happening to you in your workplace that you don't like, but what you might be doing to contribute to it. Because the reality is, you could be a difficult employee and they could still be discriminating against you, right? Because I've been in workplaces where lots of people were difficult, but only certain difficult people got held accountable and other difficult people didn't. So I'll give you an example. I have a strong personality. I've had a strong personality all my life. I've had strong opinions all my life, which generally I back up with facts, right? But I was working in an environment where I was on an executive management team filled with people with strong personalities. And we used to have really great conversations as a team because all of us were super smart people with strong personalities. But I found over and over again that when I expressed my unvarnished opinion about something, I would get called, to pull to the side after meetings with my boss, who's a white woman, and told that I was being to this or to that. Meanwhile, I had, white male coworkers on that same team who were dropping F-bombs, who would go off when they didn't like something, right, in the meeting, and they wouldn't get called out. And so I started documenting how often that happened, how often I noticed that not just me, but the other woman who was my counterpart, white female, how we would get called out if we showed anger or displeasure of any kind, especially me. But when the men on the team did it, because it was a team of 3 women, a senior management team of 3 women and 2 men, right? And I started noticing that when me and the other woman, the third woman being the president, but when me and the other woman expressed, got very, strident with our opinions, raised our voice, anything like that, we would get called out about it, either right after the meeting or she'd show up at your office the next day or something to say something. But when the men did it, they weren't having the same experience. How do I know? Because I asked. One of them got along really well with me, and I would just kind of ask, did she say something to you about, you were really on one in the last meeting? Did she come and say anything to you? Oh, no, right? And so I started documenting the differential treatment. And I was able to use it later when I needed to. But I also used it to call her out when she did it. And I got tired of it. And I was finally like, I've documented the fact that you don't do this with the men on the team. And how many times this one person would come in there and just say whatever they felt, which I didn't have a problem with. But I had a problem with the fact that I couldn't say whatever I felt, right? And so that's an example of, even though in certain environments, my strong opinion would have been an issue. But in this environment where people were being encouraged to have strong opinions and some people were being praised and awarded for having strong opinions, I was being treated differently, right? But in some situations, the problem is that some folks are just problematic. Some people come in with an attitude, they come in with a chip on their shoulder. Sometimes they come in with a chip on their shoulder because bad experiences they had at another job that they didn't address in therapy and other things. So you bring it to the next job, you come in expecting people to act wild with you. And so you're giving them attitude from the first day, and then you don't understand why people don't like you and why people don't want to work with you. So it's really important for us to engage in self-assessment, self-auditing, have some self-awareness, be honest with ourselves about what our weaknesses are and how those things might contribute to healthy and or unhealthy interactions at work and or even in your personal life. Another example, several months ago, was talking to someone on a discovery call They were telling me that they thought maybe they were being discriminated against at work. Asked the person to tell me a little bit more about what was happening. They told me they had been on a PIP. They had just been taken off the PIP. I asked them, to share some of the grounds for the PIP. They did. And what surfaced in the conversation was, I asked them, is any of the things in the PIP accurate? Is what your manager is saying about the weaknesses you have in your job performance, are they accurate? And the person admitted to me that many of the things that their manager was saying about their performance was accurate, that they in fact were having difficulty meeting deadlines, that they had dropped the balls on certain projects, that there were some issues, right? And so I said to them, now, can you make an argument that you're being treated differently in any way in terms of, are other people on your team dropping the ball? Are other people on your team not doing things they're supposed to be? And are they being treated the same way? And the person had to admit that, in fact, they hadn't observed other colleagues having these issues, that they were the person on the team having these issues. They didn't feel that they had necessarily been given a lot of support when they just came into the job, but they couldn't argue that anybody else had been given any additional support either, right? And the reality was that they had been taken off the PIP and not fired. So the person had tried to give them some time, gave them some metrics to meet. They were able to meet them. The manager took them off the PIP, but after taking them off the PIP, the manager was continuing to express frustration about areas where they still hadn't quite perfected in the job. And also, I think the manager was a bit frustrated because they felt like, I've given this person all these chances and I still feel like they're not quite doing what I want to do. So what I explained to the person is, I don't think what you're experiencing is discrimination. I think what you're experiencing from your manager is frustration. And I gave them some tips and coaching around how to talk to their manager about it and how to try to, rehabilitate the relationship with their manager, because the danger was that they could end up on another PIP, and this time they could end up in a termination situation. But I really commended and appreciated the fact the person was able to be honest about the fact that they did have some deficits in their performance. There were things that they needed to be doing differently, right? And not just said, oh no, well, I'm perfect, I walk on water, but she's treating me differently, but I can't prove it, which I hear a lot from people as well, right? It's really important to be honest, because I'm no magician. And the reality is that if you can't prove discrimination when you talk to me, you're probably not going to be able to prove it to an attorney or anybody else. And when you're trying to prove discrimination, you have to be honest. You have to be able to go deep into, is it true that I'm doing the things I'm being accused of or not doing, or being accused of not doing, right? Can I show examples of other people doing the same things and being treated differently or held to another standard, right? That's the test. Are you being treated differently? And is it on the basis of your protected characteristic, whether it's race, ethnicity, ability, religion, all these things. But it can't be a feeling. And you have to be honest about, are you doing your job? Are you coming into work with an attitude? Are you acting crazy with people? Do you have difficulty hearing any kind of criticism? If people don't tell you exactly what you want to hear, do you get upset? All of these are things that could cause you to have problems at work and has nothing to do with discrimination, right? So I think it's really important to be able to engage in self-assessment, be self-aware, be honest, be able to be a critical thinker, and be honest about whether or not you're being discriminated against or whether or not you do have performance issues that you need to address, okay? So I really felt the need to talk about this because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I was talking to a friend about it recently. I'm actually in my 43rd country that I've ever visited in the world, and one of my friends that I'm visiting is a resume expert, and we were just talking about some of the things that people do or don't do at work that causes problems for them, and it really made me think about this. But on another note, I wanted to ask you guys, would you like some advice about improving your resume? Do you think it would be helpful to have a conversation with my friend about things that people should be doing to make their resumes the kind of resumes that employers want to see, how to understand how AI now impacts how employers look at resumes and things like that. So if you think that would be of interest to you, please drop it in the comments and I'll put something together to share that information. But in the meantime, I'd love to know whether or not my comments in this video have resonated with you, whether you ever had an experience where you had to admit that maybe the problem was you at work. And that really requires a certain level of self reflection and self awareness that a lot of us don't have. I'm just going to be blunt. Some of us don't have that depth of self-awareness to be honest enough, but I would love to hear where people can be honest, where in fact they weren't being treated differently. They just weren't able to do the job, because every job ain't for everybody. Sometimes it's a bad fit for you. And it's not that someone's treating you differently. It's just that you can't do the job. Every job isn't for everybody. And sometimes you're just not the best fit for a job. And it's not that you're being discriminated against. And it's not that you're being treated differently. It's just that this is not the right place for you. And so have you ever been in a situation where you thought maybe you were dealing with discrimination, and then you came to realize, in fact, this is just not a good fit for me? And none of these things are necessarily happening to me because of my race, my gender, or any of those other things. It's happening to me because this is just not a good place for me to be. And so I just need to get up out of here. So I would love to know whether any of you have had that experience, but I really want to just say self-awareness is key. Critical thinking is important. And sometimes the common denominator might be you. I hope this video was helpful to whomever needed to hear this today. And as always, HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend, but I am. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.